All right, so today's video will go over the 7.5 practice number 1, factoring a trinomial. So each problem is going to be 2 slides. So the first thing you want to do is find the GCF of 3, 10, and 7. Now if you use slide number 3, it will actually tell you that it's a 1. There will be no variable for the GCF because the 7 does not have one. So if the GCF is in fact 1, you can just retype the expression. Now we're going to do the diamond. 3 times 7 is 21. Our middle term, the one next to our x, is 10. Now 7 and 3 are the two numbers that work. 7 times 3 gets you 21. 7 plus 3 will get you 10. Now you need those numbers for the box. So click this right here to show where they go. And then in step number 4 it says write your first term in the first box. Write your last term in the last box. Now those terms, what I'm getting is from here. 3x squared is my first term, 7 is my last term. And the 10x is actually split up using the 3x and using the 7x. Now the last problem of this slide, it's not going to be written for you. It's not going to be inputted for you. You're going to need to know that these two numbers come from your diamond. That's why it's so important. And then from there, what we're going to do is find the GCFs. So finding the GCF of 3x squared and 7x. Remember, use slide number 3 if you need to. The greatest common factor of 3 and 7 is a 1. Greatest common factor of x squared and x is just an x. So we don't write that 1x. All you need to do is write an x. We don't need to write that 1. And then we're going to do the same thing for the bottom row. We have the 3x and the positive 7. Once again, if you use slide 3, the GCF of 3 and 7 is a 1. Notice that there's no x this time. It's because the 7 does not have an x. Now I'm going to use the columns. I'll show my work up here so you can see it nicely. So the greatest common factor of 3x squared and 3x is going to be a 3x. The biggest number that 3 share is itself. It's just a 3. And then the greatest common factor of this column, the 7x plus 7, is once again going to be a 7. Now we can double check. X times 3x gets me 3x squared. That's actually pretty big. Maybe I'll do a thumbs up. X times 7 gets me 7x. 1 times 3x gets me 3x. 1 times 7 gets me that 7. So let's verify that. We have the x, we have the 1, then we have the 3x in blue, and then we have the 7. Now how we write our answer is by grouping the sides together. So my red side is x plus 1. My blue side is 3x plus 7. Now as long as you group them together like that, your answer will be correct. However, you are allowed to write the 3x plus 7 first if you wanted to. So I'm going to write that in parentheses. And there you go. All right, problem number 2. Once again, the GCF of this problem is going to be a 1. The greatest common factor of 12, 4, and 5 is a positive 1. So I'm just going to rewrite my expression. And now we have 4 times 5, which is 20. Our B value is 12. So the only two numbers that work in the entire world is 10 and 2. Now we're going to use that 10 and 2 inside the area model. Once again, I put it there for you. Eventually that will be taken out. And then you do first term, first box. So my first term was 4x squared. Last term, last box. So once again, I got that from my 4x here, my 4x squared, and I got my 5 from there. And now I'm going to find the GCF. GCF of 4x squared plus a 2x is going to be a positive 2 and an x, because the greatest number that 4 and 2 share is 2. And they both share at least one x. Greatest common factor of 10x and 5. Greatest common factor, biggest number they share, is going to be a 5. Now we get to do the columns. Four x squared and 10x. Remember, they both share an x, and the biggest number that they share is a 2. And then here, the greatest number that 2, x, and 5 is going to be a 1, a positive 1. Let's double check. Now, as long as you group the GCF of the rows together and the GCF of the columns together, you will get the correct answer. The answer is parentheses 2x plus 5 times parentheses 2x plus 1. All right, the GCF is definitely a 1 because our A is a 1. And there's no x with the 8, so it cannot be 1x. So 1 times 8 is 8. And then our B value is 6. So the only two numbers that multiply to get 8 and add to get 6 are 2 and 4. All right, to get that, you have to move on to slide number 9. All right, so here, first term, first box. So it says x squared. If you want to put a 1x squared, that's fine. First term is in the first box, last term is in the last box. And then we want to find the GCFs. So I'm not going to show my work right now. I'm going to just do my arrows for my work. Greatest common factor between 1 and 2 is a 1. And then the greatest common factor is x squared. So instead of writing a 1, you can write just an x. Greatest common factor of a 4 and an 8 is just a positive 4. Because remember, we have a 1, and we have a 2, and we have a 4. The 8 has a 1, a 2, a 4, and an 8 as well. So the biggest, greatest common factor is a 4. So you can show your work that way if you need to. Greatest common factor of 1x squared and 4x is just an x. Greatest common factor of 2x and 8 is a 2. And remember, we can actually check our answers from here before we do the self-check. X times x, yes, that gets me 1x squared. 1x times 2, yes, that gets me 2x. 4 times x gets me 4x. And then 2 times 4 gets me that 8 value. So let's check this. So we have the x, we have the 4, we have the x, and then we have the 2. And then just put the outside inside parentheses. And you'll get the correct answer. For here, you want to be a little more careful because we have a negative b value. Once again, the GCF is a 1, so I'm just going to rewrite it. So then 3 times 4 is 12. And then our b value is negative 8. So here's my trick for you. If you're struggling with finding the puzzle when it's a negative b and a positive a times c, it will always be a negative and a negative if you have this type of combination. So then you have negative 6 and negative 2. Because 2 negatives multiply together get you a positive, and then add to stay a negative. Now those negative signs are really going to matter when we are finding the GCF. And I will explain why in a moment. Right now, our first term is a positive. So since it's a positive, we want to be mindful that we have to take out a positive. So the GCF would be 1x. Now this is where you have to be mindful. This is a negative 6x plus 4. So the first term is negative here, so we have to take out a negative. Greatest common factor between 6 and 4 is a 2. But we need to make it a negative 2 because our first term is negative. And the same applies for the columns. So our first term here was a positive, which is what we need it to be. So then it's going to be a 3x because our first term is positive. But now for this one, we have a negative 2x as our first term and a positive 4. So then no matter what, I have to take out a negative. And I have to take out that negative 2 because that is our greatest common factor. So let's check it in the table. So we had just an x, we had a negative 2, then we had another 3x, and then we had a negative 2. So then x minus 2, and then 3x minus 2 as well. Now for slide number 12 and 13, I took away the self-check on slide 13, so you guys could get used to what to do. The GCF of this problem is a 1, so that's why we could rewrite it. So now we have negative 15, and we have a negative 2. Now, since both of them are negative, only one number can be negative, and that number has to be the bigger factor because our b value is negative. So in this case, I know that my 5 is going to be negative and my 3 is going to be positive. Now these two numbers, this is how you're splitting up the x's. So you need to write in this box the negative 5 and the 3, and you're going to put the x. Now if you chose to put 3x on the top corner and negative 5x on the bottom, that's totally fine. That's doable. So first term, first box, last term, last box. So then we can find the GCFs here. The GCF of a positive 3x squared and a negative 5x is just an x. Positive 3x and negative 5 is just a positive 1 because our leading term is positive. But then the column, you have to be careful. Greatest common factor of 3 and 3 is itself, and then an x. And then remember, our first term is negative, so we have to take out a negative. Greatest common factor of negative 5x and negative 5 is going to be a negative 5. Now this is the part that is not self-check. The reason why it's not self-check is you could have 3x minus 5 on the side, and you could have x plus 1 on top, depending on where you put your x's. Now the part that is self-check is the actual answer. So you did all of that work to get these two parentheses. Now if you want to write the 3x minus 5 parenthesis first, and then the x plus 1 parenthesis last, that would be fine as well.